kind of playing around with the finger wand, handmade crystal, and the music. And listen to this. I'm going to hit the singing bowl. Setting it with the crystal. Thanks for listening to that. Thanks for being here. Welcome to part 2 of the journey through the mother-sister wound. Okay, so I just want to welcome you here, welcome you back. Thanks for being here. And this is part of both sharing some of my personal experiences, but also looking at the picture the best way I can with what I consider are remembrances. I used to call them downloads, but the message I got was these are actually remembrances. So in all this is actually working through what was a space that was matriarchal and predominantly female and the great mothers to today, and the slow manipulation. So I first want to address one of somebody who left a comment below in reference to the great mothers and safety, because in the last video I talked about how safety is one of the number one necessary things for a healthy community and a healthy body, the whole thing, right? So you remove safety. When I spoke about males being protectors, I'm speaking about what we've been told as far as history. When we see these stories of males, typically violent, as protectors, and then we're given stories about the warriors and things like that. And so the story we're getting is that that's what developed, which in itself is somewhat patriarchal, because I agree with you in the sense that we see that there were a multitude of examples of women held societies where there was no violence, there was no need for tools, and that kind of safety was, it seems as though safety was implied. Through time, somewhere, safety was removed, and then the communities along with that. And I missed a big, huge one, which is the extraction of the connection to nature. That was something else. I mean, that's literally where we learned everything. And I'm going to go into that in this video. And specifically wanting to clarify that statement, because it's true. Our greatness still exists and did exist. Somewhere we forgot. Violence took it from us. Did the pen create a lot of it? That's another theory. I literally just talking with one of my friends yesterday, thinking, did patriarchy come with the pen? But dissecting the mother wound within this. So ultimately what we see today is safety removed by men, by those who were told are protectors. And I think what was originally possibly hunting, or whenever it shifted from we were connected with the animals to when they had to start fearing us because we were eating them, right? Then the whole cycle is going to change. So it's part of why I spoke about that is to specify the need for safety. And that when it's removed, what happens to the psyche, to the community, to the matriarchal perspective. in general, what you're speaking about, it's true. Where did that happen? And I'm not sure. I think it's all been slow, and these are like the little droplets of mother wounds perpetuated that have created all these different aspects of the mother wound, sister wound. Some call it even the witch wound, because, as I said in the last video, over a period of time, you learn these stories over and over, it gets imprinted into your brain. And so the same thing with speaking highly of the Great Mother and breaking things down like this. If it gets repeated and repeated and repeated, the theory is that will also affect you. And so thank you for that question. That's my response to that. Moving on into this next part of it. So yes, we left off with the mirroring aspect. I was saying the broken mirror. I want to change that as just the that it's not that the mirror is broken, it's that how we've been taught around reflection and our own work and other people's works, and just now the mental health and psychology and child psychology and even elder psychology has figured out what happens in the mind and body through certain different things, and recognizing like the immense damages of what was considered the norm and acceptable to not. And I feel like that's where we're at, especially with patriarchy and the matriarchy. And so it's reflecting literally, and so that's what a mirror does. The reflections, so the reflections are sometimes illusions. Sometimes the reflection is what you've been taught to see, or what others tell you to see. And I relate to that specifically in this video because I had already done a second part to this video. But there are things about, well, specifically makeup. Okay, so I've recently learned, and I feel like I've known this, but it's been solidified, that when women wear makeup, the outside tends to spend more money. They make more money when you wear makeup, because there is this impression, this idea that you care. It's not an impression, an idea. It's true that you care about yourself and you care about your looks. There is also another aspect to that I recognize, okay, because I like I'm not anti-makeup. I'm not anti adorning and decorating and like dressing up, and I think all that is so fun. It's the these reflections, once male dominated, because it used to be male dominated, that wore wigs, wore makeup, wore fancy clothes, wore the more elite, but it was the male thing, to then become the female thing. And then not only the female thing, but you're going to be paying more, and you're predominantly, or it is a feminine thing. This has really been changing, especially with like the punk rock era, in as far as modern, because in many cultures males would wear makeup and wigs and those type of things. It wasn't taboo like it has been presented here. But you did see a rise in like Kiss in the Americas, and that whole like kind of like 80s, late 70s, 80s rock bands. The males, they had long hair and wore tons of makeup. It was cool. It was like the cool thing. So we see how this is kind of what I'm saying, where there's this reflection, but also for the females, a lot of those products, hair products, not now. Now it's because people figured out that these products were harming women who were using it long term, and especially in the brown community around like hair relaxer and things like that. So this is, and then those are microcosms of how it feels to not be part of the community. Most of us do a lot of these things. Like I said before, it started with the males. The males were all doing it because the community was doing it. It was acceptable. It was no big deal. But as soon as, my theory is predominantly religion, changed that, and mostly because of what is considered like pious reasons, or I think I'm using that word correctly, but to show humility, because it was predominantly the people who had a lot of money who wore makeup and the wigs, and so it was to shift out of kind of showiness, and yet the looks and the femininity, the masculine defined, because that to me is also part of patriarchy. In the matriarchal realm, we didn't do that. In the matriarchal realm, we didn't say, you're a female, this is absolutely your role. You're a male, this is absolutely your role. And in this role, this is what it looks like. These are your jobs, this is your responsibility. No, if anything, it was community based. So if we were with other females, it was because we all shared something in common, or the society kind of forced us into that, because there was a time still where like, and we're still there, where there's not a lot of like all female buildings where men are not allowed, and it's like a cigar lounge, and then they have male strippers. Right? You know, we don't see a lot of that. It's not accepted. Women aren't supposed to behave like that. But there's plenty of places where this is acceptable for the males in the communities. And so here, something shifted. This is where, and those are, in each of those descriptions I've given, there are microcosms of how, by stripping the memory of her authority and power position and magics and medicines and all those things, reteaching it back to her, taking it, because somewhere either they were taught it and then took it, or just took it and then learned it and then rewrote it out of there, because again, that's what I'm saying, is the pen responsible for patriarchy? Did they just write, did we write things down first, like the Cumet story? If you know about the Cumet story. So in the Cumet story, if you don't know, Cumet is a sibyl, is an ancient sibyl, the story is, and she offered 9 books to a king, Tarquin, and he refused the books. She went and burned 3 books. No, she returned with 6 books. Oh, and she asked for 9 pieces of gold, or 90 pieces of gold, something. And so she burns one of the books and comes back. And I question this story, because my theory is he got all the books. That's what I think. I used to think he only got one of the books because this is the story, but I don't know. I just, would we do that? I don't know. Maybe because we knew how important the information was, and if it got in the wrong hands. And so I have a theory around her and that king. Anyways, the story is she went and burned 3 more books. She comes back. She has 3 books left. And I might be messing up, but it was 3 books, and she went and burned 1 and came back with 2, burned that one, came back with 1. I think that's the story. And he ended up buying that last one. So when did we start writing things down? Because did we start writing things down when we lost our safety in our communities? When our communities became small and we just became like nuclear family, so to speak, are controlled under the system of patriarchy. So, with the makeup thing, and we use mirrors to see what we look like so we can. So in that, there are many. Let me say the mirror can be distorted. The illusion. You go into those fun houses and you see those different mirrors and make you look all different kinds of ways. What if every single mirror around the world made people look really tall and thin, or really short and fat? Would we all have a different perception about ourselves and everyone else, even though we're looking at people? Or maybe we do get that reflection where we see ourselves in reality, but we feel like that's not reality. This is what patriarchy has done. This is what slips when we remove safety, community, and then either usurp or completely steal the knowledge and then reteach it back. Okay, and then we go into nature. So I think makeup, yeah. Because even makeup used to be made from things only found in nature. It wasn't all chemically. I mean, there were some dangerous things. We've read about some of the Egyptians and makeup. But you'll see makeup kind of arrive across the board in the history they've been telling us, because we also see it in the indigenous Americas. A type of face paint, right? So this is not new, and it has just shifted as to how it is perceived and who can wear it and in what kind of way. And that is part of that seeps into, this is what I keep saying, that seeps into how we see ourselves, how we see other women, how our mothers see us, how we see our mothers. So we're going to move into nature with that, because before patriarchy, it was also nature. And when you go into nature, when you take the time to study nature, females run everything. There's not a lot of males. In a deer herd, there's usually only one stag, one male. And he's been around for a minute. He's the guy. They're not typically bringing in young bucks. It's usually an older stud, so to speak, or male. In horses, it is thought that horses are run by the stallion. They're not. The female picks the stallion. I think horses, I'm going to check on this, but aren't horses also menopausal? I think horses stop being in heat. And don't also dogs? Are we missing a few here? I feel like we might be missing a few. So, I'll do a little research on that. But what I did find out is that there are mother-daughter specific relationships in nature. So not only does the female run stuff, in the turkeys, I've noticed if one of the females is so the males will do their thing, they're doing their fancy, they're dancing, right? They're doing all their dancing. And one of the females might be like, I'm kind of attracted to him. Where the other females will be like, no, you get over here. They bring her back into the flock of the females, and the males will, it's funny because the male will be like, oh, and even the older male who's kind of or the other male will kind of be like, wait, is this for real? Because they know, because they've been around for a minute. No, and it takes them, sometimes it could take days, sometimes they don't even get picked. But the females protect their daughters and the other females in the group. And you'll see this with elephants. Elephants are very close with their mothers. The daughters stay with their mothers for their entire lives. And so, do you see how some things could have been taken from nature and our original teachings and then used against us? to perpetuate systems where we support abusers over our friends, man, I cannot tell you. I'm floored, because I noticed it with my own family, my own mothers, taking sides with my abusers. My father also took sides with my abusers, mostly because they were male. Everything was my responsibility. Like, it was my fault that I didn't support them. It was my fault that I did support them. It was very confusing. And that's part of patriarchy, and that contributes to an unrealistic expectation of myself, and I think also other females. Because if I'm in a patriarchal system and I'm expecting my mothers to also see what I'm seeing, but they've had to live in a patriarchal system longer than me, they're already preconditioned for survival. And they're, I don't think, always purposely thinking that they're harming their daughters. But I also don't think that they recognize when they are harming their daughters and work to mend that, because in a patriarchal society, males they don't have to do that. If you can please, it's like taught, this is what I was kind of taught, if you can please the right minimal abusive male, then you have status. And that's the other thing. So I start talking about feelings in the last one, because one of the things we also recognize is the status around partnership. Okay? So in nature, partnership is earned. Like, they have to work for it, and not always do they get to stay around after partnership has happened. Birds and some mammals will mate for life. Oh, also dolphins and wolves share a very deep connection with the females and the daughters in their pack. And I think it's called a pod with the dolphins. Their group. So we see in nature everywhere where the female has position, and her feelings matter. Her feelings are the ones that are most important. So we move into the aspects of how we feel about ourselves and then how we feel about others, and then we can absolutely disassociate from the community. Then we start individually, disassociating from the community, which is other women, because we typically will protect each other and others. So if you, as a C star, so many situations, it's just flooring, where, granted, I'm not saying like put up with your girlfriend's bad behavior, but if you're not going to put up with your girlfriend's bad behavior, why are you allowing your boyfriend, husband, partner to be horrible to you continuously over and over and over and over and over? It was me in those situations where I was like, wait, why are females in my life on my abuser's side? This doesn't quite make sense. And why aren't they, the abusers, somehow holding to the same rules and expectations, or even other family members, but specifically males? I'm also seeing like how sisters or daughters of, say, a unavailable father can fully recognize their bad behavior, but because I see this a lot in my biological family, because a certain daughter is treated differently by that extremely abusive father. That child or that daughter kind of excuses or dismisses the really bad behavior. So does that get passed down to the sons? I think so. And I think it gets passed down to the daughters inadvertently. I don't think anyone's like, let's teach this. But I think those who originally removed, and again, I don't know exactly who it was, and I don't think it happened overnight. I think it was a slow churning of removing safety, violently destroying communities. And my guess is that probably started getting out, like wherever the first violent takeover of land and usurpation started happening, the word probably got out. Or before that, it was hunting. But the point is, in the mesh of all these feelings, creates patternal behavior where we as women excuse bad behavior of our brothers, sons, fathers, boyfriends, males, demonize each other, and allow even, do you know how many insults are female based? But if you call somebody, say, like a male based word, which is like, I don't know if I could say this on here, but an illegitimate child. Okay, that's one, which is pretty bad, but it's a male one. I'm just saying. And then there's like the phallic name that starts with a D for the male. If you call somebody that, but if you call somebody a cat, pussycat, keyword, or the B word or the C word, I could go on for a while. Jezebel is another one. That's an insult now. We're using a sea star's name to shame other sea stars. That is literally a spiritual and perpetual mother sister witch wound. She was destroyed by males. She worshipped the Great Mother. She had much insight. They went to her place. That was her palace. They threw her out of. It's amazing how we, even as females, this is where I'm talking about the mirror reflection. We, even as females, are like, yeah, she's bad. That's why I brought up the witch trials. Like, what? When did that switch? Somewhere, fear took over. Fear is the most influential. In marketing, fear is promoted. And that links to your emotions. So let's start with makeup as the example, okay? So if you look better, you get more money. So then, even as an individual who may not care about makeup, could be extremely intelligent, very pretty, but because they're not wearing makeup, they might make less money. That does something to me. Listening to this is where I think, oh my gosh, am I stupid? Because I don't think I'm stupid, but is it foolish not to wear makeup to make more money? Is it pressure to concede to what males have decided is what we're supposed to do? Is it part of equanimity? And so then I might be concerned to go get some makeup, because what's being triggered in me is an emotion. And that emotion is money. Could I possibly be losing money? So that's my stability. That does something immediately to my nervous system. That does something immediately to my consciousness. Even if it's, okay, let's just say it's a positive thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I put makeup on. I feel and look so much better. Boom. Now, that will be something that helps support me feeling good, which is not bad, but it's based in the service is, they don't necessarily say you're not beautiful, but the culture has already taught us if you wear makeup and you're prettier, you're going to make more money as a female. You're going to have a little bit more privilege and opportunity in this today's patriarchal capitalistic world. And meanwhile, whoever owns these companies, whoever owns these stores, they're the ones who are actually benefiting. And then somewhere down the line, a lot of these beauty products, there's a lawsuit, somebody ends up with something happening to them, they're allergic to it. I mean, we find out there's something horrible done to make it. Old products I used to get, if you watch some of my old videos, you'll know this, but some of the hair products I used to get, I started looking at ingredients, I don't know, in the 90s. And I noticed I had gotten this hair serum and it worked very well on my hair. And I was like, well, what is in it? Placenta was in it. And you should see me. I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh. Because then I started thinking about all of those tubes all over the world. And I started freaking out. I was like, what are we doing as human beings? And so it's also that place where if we do become aware of what's happening, but then I'll just clarify shortly thereafter, I think within 7 months, all of those products no longer had placenta in them. So I wasn't the only one who was like, what the heck, fire. Also, what happens? What happened when I relaxed my hair? What happened when I stopped? What happened when I put locks in? What happened when I stopped? These were all things that partly were mine, but were also told to me by people mostly who do not look like me, telling me that's what I'm supposed to do, to fit in with a group of people who also do not look like me and do not feel like I am part of their group. And the emotions that come with that. And that's not just me. This is every single person. And we start getting into like skin tone and things like that. How do you think that affects people's emotions? I can't tell you how many pale people criticize themselves about how they look, spend money on getting tans, spend money on getting their hair done, which is, I'm all for it. Like, make yourself feel good. What I'm trying to point out is the emotional wave behind this mirror, this reflection, this institutional, indoctrinated ways of patriarchy and capitalism that usurp and utilize emotion. This is what the Great Mothers knew. This is what I'm going to keep saying. We know and we knew that if you can utilize and master your emotions, you can utilize and master the elements. But if they keep you distracted, and here, some word plays. I'm going to talk about some word plays. Makeup. Wait a minute. Makeup. We could break it down into two different ways. Maybe like you make it up, right? Like getting up higher. Or like you're pretending. What is even those words, like what are they doing in our psyche? Because that is something else we were aware of. You know, make rise, you know, or splendoring. I'm splendoring my face. How about that? I always say stuff like that. You know what I mean? And then a fan. So I was specifically thinking about football and baseball because I started at first. I will say this. I stopped watching football when I found out that every Sunday more domestic violent cases happen during football Sunday, and specifically Super Bowl Sunday, than any other day of the year. And it just made me so upset, because how much money and time do fans, I did it, I spent money on, I'm boxing up and organizing all kinds of, not just me, but specifically my family members who were football fans, all kinds of football regalia. I spent a lot of money on those things, especially during those times. Watched the games, spent money on food to watch the games, and it was fun. Like, when you're a family and you're having a good time, you're eating good food, it's fun. It's entertainment. It's good entertainment. It's good group entertainment. And if you're in the stadium, but as a fan, let's think about that word for a second, because you're all picturing yourself in a stadium cheering something on. Well, also picture an actual fan. The one most of us are using right now because it's freaking hot. And why are we using that fan? To blow air around. So we equate somebody who's in a stadium or somebody who's supporting something as a fan, but their job is what? They're just blowing air around. Who's benefiting from that? The owners of that team are mostly benefited. And then the owners will trickle down their makings to the players. But we've even heard it. They are called owners of the team. Like, what? How are we missing this? So bringing this all back is that those players, those owners, they don't care about you personally as a fan. They don't care about that person who's harming their spouse or wife or girlfriend or someone in their house over who won or lost the football game, baseball, soccer, basketball game. Those players don't care about who the fans are. They just need those fans blowing around that energy, blowing around that air. And yet, the invested emotion, I watched it. I watched people cry and laugh and celebrate and rage over who won or lost a game. That is intense emotional control. And then you just spurt that out. Spread that out. Let those fans, let that air just blow around. And perceptions and compensation starts happening within the body and the nervous system. And then things start triggering within the nervous system where you're thinking, I'm feeling anxiety. Yeah, you're feeling anxiety because you're emotionally connected to something that you have no control over. And that actually isn't giving the same energy back. To say that. I'm not saying you're not getting anything from it, because I had great times doing that stuff. But I started feeling guilty. I mean, the amount of things you can feel guilty for that's happening in the world right now, and we can't change, it's just overwhelming. And that's part of, I think that's all connected to the great mother sister wound. Because if we as females were indoctrinated, in community and supporting each other and seeing things like, wait a second, and we did, like the suffrage, and there's all kinds of stories you see in the olden days when we didn't have to go to work all the time and that type of thing, which I'm not anti that. It's the system around what is okay for males and what is not okay for females, and then we as females take that information, and then we, instead of building community with it, oftentimes we are hurting and harming our sisters, mothers, daughters, friends, because of this accepted male bad behavior and a high expectation of the great mothers, sea stars, and females. Okay, and then, so I talked about the mother, daughter, and nature. I talked a little bit about the word spell. Okay, and then I did talk also a little bit about, did the pen start it? I don't know. But, okay, so, and then in my own personal experiences have been where women have shunned me, been mean to me, and put high expectations on me around males, while also soliciting me for readings, being able to do mediumship. So that is valid, but my feelings or perspectives around the male deficit in the sense of comparison to the females of the world it's weird. It's weird. Like, this is valid, but this is not valid. Oh, because it suits you. And we're seeing that a lot right now. Like, oh, this didn't really suit me. We've been trying to say this. A lot of us have been saying for a long time to recognize these subtle nuances of patriarchy and the overwhelm kind of takeover of the great mothers, the feminine energy. I'm a femininist. I'm a femininist, right? Where it's like, from the beginning, this is my ultimate theory. Everything here on this, what we are living on, Gaia, comes, things that we can see. I think, Gaia may have created herself, or she might also have a great mother that helped give birth to her. Tiamat, maybe. Or a combination, Also, what we see on this planet is that mothers bring in what is here on this planet. So my theory is that whatever is making everything must be feminine. And from that comes what we call masculine. There's no separation. It's all feminine. It's different expressions of the feminine. I know it sounds crazy, and we've broken it up because we have genders, and we're saying, like, this is what is masculine and this is what is feminine. Well, who taught us that? Who explained that in the first place? Who was like, this is more docile, this is more submissive, and this is more aggressive, and this is more powerful or authoritative? Great mothers were like, this is this and this is this, because we are both. We are able to hold arms and to fight and to hunt and to feel pain and to bleed and to rage and to put on the mask with all of, but we're also able to be like dainty and pure acting, or not pure acting, but pure in the sense of like innocence and love and just generosity and giving and knowledge. It's all her. It's all her. So to me, and then when you see that it's all her, you see that he is an aspect of her that hasn't also been taught about her. He doesn't know her at all. He knows him. Okay, so the next video will be, okay, before I say that part, all of this is, and then we go into, like, I've talked about this in an old video before, we go into circumcision and harm to infants. I consider it harmful. I know that it is considered so many things, However, there is scientific and psychological proof that when a infant is harmed, something happens in their brain and in their body, because they are not at an age or consciousness to understand why it's happening. Sure, they don't remember when they're 14, but it's stored in their body. And what is that? Is it possibly removal of safety? An internal click to the male to keep him internally unaware that he's not safe? And that this is how you stay safe, is you present this way? Because great mothers would not have... I think we knew what circumcision did. Any kind of pain to an infant is going to affect them in some kind of way. So we did what we could to protect them and try not to let any harm come to them, and to help them feel nurtured and important in who they were. And so all of these little microscopic things affect how we think about ourselves, affect our nervous system, affect our guts, and then that in turn affects our mind, our nervous system, our guts, our lymph system. And so when we start deprogramming, we start using things like emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, and we learn to give words to how we're feeling, and we learn to allow ourselves to check in with how we feel. We've been so programmed, even with the circumcision, programmed to not feel. You know, do you get to talk about it? Even when you're older, you're like, hey, I think I might have. And so I'm speaking that because in the matriarchal society, safety, community, nature, and knowledge. And where did we get that knowledge? From nature. And we studied nature, and we watched what the females did. And then we somewhere something shifted. We gave them power over us, and they gladly accepted it. And then by no means want to give it back. It's shifting. It is shifting. And that will be the next video. The next video will go into what we're seeing. Some of the stories great mothers shared with me that where I have actual videos on it. I'll try to see if I can find them and bring them up. Or you can look back at videos where great mother talked about what was going to be seen this year in 2025. The 9. The feminine, especially in the calendar people, where those who, are aware of this calendar number, because people have different calendars and it's a different year for different people. For this energy and for this number, what was shown to me and what is actually happening and what's to come. Because it's going to be a little rough, but these are the keys. The keys are learning things like the Great Cosmic Mother, reading about the Great Cosmic Mother, books like Women's Myths and Secrets, and encoding art and expression. Things like Mommy and I are one. This kind of art. Even all these different... This is somewhat on purpose, because I know subliminally this is sending out... You can see the energy coming off of it. This is made by Solo Stanley. If you all don't know, you can find her on Etsy. She makes all kinds of cool art that is about vibration. Okay? And then these I made. You can see the vibrations going off, right? And then we all know this is the Eye of Wadjet. That's their original name, the Eye of Wadjet. Not the Eye of Horus, not the Eye of Ra, the Eye of Wadjet. Because that was the first eye sent out to go find blah 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 is the story. And is that related to a star? Probably. Anyhow. And then mommy and I are one, because subliminally it helps to heal subconsciously. And then a great mother mask, whose eyes always look like they're glistening a little bit to me. A feature of the Grand Canyon, indigenous hieroglyphs, even if they're not, you can't even see them. They're sending out a vibration that's being felt. And these were things, symbols and stuff like this. All these things were originally the Great Mother's information and knowing from watching and witnessing nature. And those colors in nature and those smells in nature and putting your feet on the ground. Guess what it does? It affects your nervous system. And so you can practice. I suggest there's tons of things you can look up. You can also check out my Patreon. This part is free on Patreon, where I have a chart, an emotional literacy chart. You can look those up. They are fantastic. I've done other little short videos on it before, but there are things like, you can take words like anger, and they can be disappointment, frustration, resentment. And you can take words like resentment. It can be like betrayal, abandonment. And then you can take those words and go further to feeling, it gets difficult because we live in a world where everyone's like, be positive and say positive things and think positive. And if you think positive and light and light and light, you're going to heal. That's bullshit. Okay? I fell for it. It's bullshit. Unless you can accept, I'm not going to say that either. When I started learning how to express my feelings and learning how to really check in with my feelings, I feel is when I started healing and seeing how I allowed what I had been taught, which was to be more loyal and to be more good girl, do the right thing, instead of being like, no, I don't want to do that. Don't get me wrong. I've definitely been a rebel and done some shitty things. Okay. And that also pushed me into being like, don't be that. But I also squashed certain boundaries when I did that. And I think that these all affect all of us. And so with emotional literacy, and then I started reading books like Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Women in Self-Esteem, the great Cosmic Mother, doing research and then sharing with you guys around the Great Mother and therapy and learning about narcissistic abuse and codependency, which it's all the same. It's all, we start looking at, when you really break down codependency, it's indoctrinated in almost everything. And in codependency, what I think is mostly diluted in the mirror is the truth of validating feelings. And that's another place to start. Is one of the things I had to do was, okay, I know how I feel. I know what I saw. I know what is happening to me. And I'm going to stop letting people tell me that that's not happening, or I'm crazy, or don't think like that, because it didn't help me feel better. It just made me feel more confused and helpless. And I can only bring those words to you because through the whole process, I learned more words to use, and I learned and practice, and there's times I have to redo it. Well, how do I feel? How am I feeling? How do I feel? How am I feeling? How do I feel? How am I feeling? And it's helped me. Like, I don't feel great about this, but I'm going to do it anyways. I feel great about this. I'm in between about it. I am definitely no. I am definitely yes. But before it used to be like, well, I said I was going to go and I don't want to disappoint anybody. And meanwhile, I'm like sweating. I've got shingles showing up or some weird something showing up. Everything in my body's like, please don't do that. Or I'd go and something terrible would happen. Or, oh my gosh, so many times ignoring my intuition, ignoring my own feelings to please be good, be this role, let go of boundaries. That is all also limitedly but spattered in the ground spell. Most things are working with our emotions. I'm working with your emotions. I'm trying to do it in a good way. But it's mostly I'm sharing my emotions, yet and still it's this is where we start seeing, like, where do we, how is our elemental and emotional energy, where are we, how are we, and what are we doing with it? So I really appreciate you watching and listening to all that, even with that disclaimer at the end, which is true. I mean, it's both. It's my emotions and the experiences and sharing them. And yeah, I mean, I think most of what we have, which is visual. And one more thing. This is a little longer than I expected, but I want to throw this last little side note in. I often hear the statement that males are visual. Everything with eyes are visual. And I actually think that this is part of like the mirror kind of sometimes illusion, trickery, is because we are so dependent on being visual, we can be tricked. Possibly by writing. You can look at writing. You can look at a book. I like reading and looking at a book and holding it in my hand and being like, I have this. See what I have? Rather than saying, it feels good to say, I have a story. But there is something kind of technologically happens in my brain when I can hold something and look at it. And I know I'm not the only one. And that is an emotion. And I mean, like the technology is working because my eyes can see it. My eyes can see it. And side note, if you notice, like sometimes when I'm speaking or if you watch other people or specifically in prayer, you'll see people close their eyes. Where we return to darkness. Where we return to removing that sensory so we can tap into a different sensory, which connects us to a different energy, which is also part of nature, which is also something the Great Mothers taught, which removes light, is my point. When you close your eyes, you're entering into darkness. And you're focusing, and it removes vision. It removes that visual kind of dependency. Okay, so like I said, next time we'll move into what is happening today, what we can see, the journey through the, where we are today. There's so much healing happening. I'm going to bring up certain people. I'm going to bring up certain examples, and we'll go from there. Finger wand. I've been seeing these advertised on Instagram. I was like, I think they stole my invention. I don't think I was the only one who did it. This is where you see where like mental mind and the 100th monkey start really working. Where inventions and ideas spring up all over, kind of all at once. All right. was such a long video. Oh, let's try this on an opposite finger. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Until next time, Great Mother be with you. Energies of wealth and, let's say, emotional wealth and emotional health to you. All right. Bye for now.